super excited to be here tonight. Thank you all for coming. I don't know who Dan Savage is, but thank you for coming here and seeing Dan Savage. Might be a good show. I just saw the program. I was like, who's Dan Savage? Thanks for coming here, and I am very excited to share with you. And I'm very excited with the topic tonight. If I get a little excited, it's because I'm passionate about this. I have learned a lot about this, and a lot of the lessons I've learned the hard way. So you're going to hear from my clinical experience, but also my personal experience, which has been a school of hard knocks in many ways. And I'll try to share a little bit with you as we go along. But obviously, this is kind of themed with the idea that this is Valentine's week, and so we thought what a perfect time to talk about attraction, the brain science of attraction. Didn't mention that in my nice little introduction, I appreciate the introduction, that I have been married now for over 35 years. Come on. Two books, and I'm working on a third book, which I'm kind of collaborating with her, called Grace Calls Spiritual Recovery After Addiction, Abandonment, or Abuse. So it's going to be a powerful healing book will be coming out hopefully in April. So I miss her a lot. She was going to come along, but she got really sick, had to cancel. But she inspires me in many, many ways. So hopefully she'll be back. You get a chance to meet her soon. Interesting. This is from I thought it was an interesting quote. A colleague, actually. One second here. I have to read up the chart here. I was confused here. Colleague once turned to the great British geneticist, G.B.S. Haldane, and said, "Tell me, Mr. Haldane, knowing what you do about nature, what can you tell me about God?" Haldane replied, "He has an inordinate fondness of beetles. Indeed, the world contains over 300,000 species of beetles. I would add, God loves the human mating gene. For no other aspect of our behavior is so complex, so subtle, or so pervasive." And so, when we're talking about attraction and brain science, we're talking about romance and things to do with this topic, we're just barely going to scratch the surface. This guy, obviously a very renowned man, considered the idea of attraction and mating as being one of the most complex titles you could address. And so, I'm not here to do a comprehensive study. This is going to just be some things I think I found that are interesting, hopefully then have some implications that can really make a difference in our lives. And so, here we go. Well, of course, this week we're going to talk about it because we've got the idea of Valentine's Day, and of course we've got Cupid. Does anybody know much about Cupid? Well, a couple different depictions of Cupid. But in classical mythology, Cupid, or the Latin Cupido, meaning desire, is the god of desire, erotic love, and attraction, and affection. He's often portrayed as the son of the love goddess Venus, and the war god Mars. It is known in Latin also as amor, love, the Greek counterpart in Eros. So although Eros appears in classical Greek art as a slender, winged youth, during the Hellenistic period, he was increasingly portrayed as a chubby boy. During this time, his iconography acquired the bow and arrow that represent his source of power. A person or even a deity who is shot by Cupid's arrow is filled with uncontrollable desire. Cupid is shown drawing his bow to inspire romantic love, often an icon for Valentine's Day. So obviously, how appropriate to talk about desire, the attraction, in light of the fact that we're talking about Valentine's Day. Obviously, for 2,000 years, this topic has been in people's minds. 2,000 years, people have discussed it, whether through mythologies or the stories they made up. The idea of attraction and desire has been something that's captured people's imagination for a long, long time. So, why is it important to you? Why is it important to you? Why is this topic of attraction important to you? Anybody want to take a shot at this? Anybody want to take a little audience participation here? Why would this topic interest you? Somebody break the ice. All right, there you go. Just study? Yeah. Yes.
I've so far had no luck with the opposite sex, so maybe I need some help.
Great, honest answer. Thank you. This is actually the things you'll learn tonight. You'll get a good chance to be successful. It's going to improve your chance of long-term success. Being here tonight will improve your chance of long-term success. I believe that. Well, attraction obviously leads to relationship. And most of us, really, relationship will be what defines our life as having been successful or unsuccessful. I mean, you think about, I'm 58 now. I've owned 7 different homes. I've owned, I don't know, countless junker cars. You know, things, possessions come, and sometimes they go. And clothing comes, it goes. Different things you do are very transient. So when you look at your life, you say, what really matters? What really matters in my life? I love my birthday, not so much because I get a lot of presents or anything. I didn't have a party this year. But it was cool because I got like, I don't know, 200 and some Facebook comments. It's the only day of the year I look at my Facebook very long, very many times. But it was kind of like the story of my life. Friends from junior high, in high school, in college, in Chicago where we worked, in Indianapolis. My whole life story was kind of played out there. The family, people I've met, people from Africa where I've spoken around the world, different places, people I've stayed in touch with for years. It's like, I feel like, man, if friendship and relationship is my legacy, I'm a rich guy. It's pretty cool to have friends, great friends, who still want to connect with you. You know, even some of them I haven't seen for 37 years. Relationship is really what's going to define much of our lives, for the good or for the bad. Our greatest highs, our lowest lows will come around our relationships. And so learning about relationships and attraction is paramount to your future and how your whole life will be defined eventually. I don't know, when I was a kid, they sang this little, we kind of got programmed a certain way. This was way back, did anybody sing this little, we'd sing, put 2 names in there, George and Alice in the tree.
Yeah.
Did that happen? Did it happen in Alaska or not? I know you were reluctantly admitting this, but we're kind of programmed that, first comes love, here comes Mary, here comes Alice with the baby carriage, kind of programmed that this is all supposed to happen. Attraction is supposed to happen, marriage is supposed to happen, kids are supposed to happen. This is all part of the fabric of what our life will become. So, please use this scripture. So, obviously, it's important. It's important. And, while divorce may be dropping nationally, there's still a lot of relationship issues going on. And actually, in the numbers, let's go back a little bit here. Most people are still desiring relationship. This is the current Gallup survey, a couple years ago. It basically showed that only 5% really had no interest in ever being married. 54% were married, some had been married previously, others, were wanting to get married. Only 5% said, I'm not interested. If you're one of those 5%, you still stay. You don't have to go. But if you have to see for somebody else, it is. Regardless, no, it's important stuff. People still want relationship. People still want relationship. But it's not all pretty. This is a stat I came across. It's interesting to me that actually Alaska, that's a 2011 statistic, 16.2 divorces per 1,000 women. Alaska has the highest divorce rate for women in the country. How many people do that? You know that? Interesting. So even though people want relationships, they want to have successful attraction relationships, there's many cases where there's a lot of sadness. A lot of things happen that they weren't counting on. I don't think any of those people went into it thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to divorce my mate in a couple of years. Nobody goes into it thinking that. Everybody spends thousands of dollars on a wedding thinking it's not going to last. But unfortunately, relationships are complex. Things happen. So let's talk about the brain part. A few brain facts here. Basic things about your brain. Your brain has approximately 86 billion neurons. 86 billion. Some of your science research will say, a lot of people say there's 100 billion. And like this latest scientist in Brazil, Susana Herculano Hauso, she's kind of started looking around saying, how do we know it's 100 billion? I mean, you may count them. How do we know this? And so she actually did a study, took brains from different people, mainly in their 50s, 60s, 70s, corpses, and she'd actually made brain soup. So basically, they take it, put some chemicals in there and dissolve the membranes to actually get, they can count the nucleus, how many cells, how many neurons there are. And of course, you take a sampling and count those, and then you scale it up to figure out what it was. And she came up with 86 million of better chemicals. You say, well, it's only 14 billion off, so what's the big deal? Well, the average baboon has 14 billion neurons in their brain. So it's a full baboon's difference between 100 and 86 billion. Either way, there's a lot. And it's interesting to know the neurons actually only multiply during pregnancy and shortly after. Basically, your neurons stop duplicating soon after you're born. So they're made to last a lifetime. They really do not reproduce. They're unique in that they're the only cells that have dendrites. They have these little fingers going out, allowing them to connect with other cells. And they figure that the average person, each one of the neurons, has thousands of connections, so much that they estimate, and they're talking about big estimations, that each person has around 100 trillion connections. Okay? 100 trillion synapses in your brain, areas where your brain connects to these dendrites. A lot of connections. So basically what happens is these connections form communities. They form communities. They form little villages, so to speak. If you ever watched the movie was it Inside Out? The cartoon? You kind of know about this, okay? The brain forms these little communities, these little developments, and that's how we become who we are, based on experiences. We form these communities of neurons in our brain. Now, what happened then, I don't know what the problem is. They copied these off, they put the notes on both sides. I'm used to speaking at home with one side of the notes, you know.
Sorry about that, Dave.
These notes are freaking out. There's things on both sides of this paper. That makes sense. Okay, thank you for being patient. Remember why I was kind of stammering up here? That's why it was. I was holding it. So, anyway, so what happens in these synapses is this electricity passes, but they don't touch each other exactly. There's neurotransmitters that go between these. And they travel at different rates. Some of them travel as fast as like 200 miles an hour. I mean, they're just zipping through our body. But they wire us. Talk about wired. We're wired a certain way. Well, it kind of is true. These dendrites and these neurons wire together, and they form these amazing communities. And that's actually how we develop what we like, what we don't like. And so ultimately comes this thing called catch walk. So this is one of the things you can impress your anatomy teacher or your psychology teacher and start talking about catch walk. It's really, so much we're not going to talk about. This is kind of a very important principle that you want to understand. Because later on, the other side is boil it down to a simple phrase: cells that fire together, wire together. So it's technically not quite true that actually one cell kind of like triggered the next cell and kind of passed through it at exactly the same time. It's kind of a chain reaction kind of thing. But close enough. Okay, we're talking about microseconds difference. But ultimately, what happens is these cells, their bonds strengthen and they become these super highways in our brain, super highways of communities of neurons that really become our likes, our dislikes, our fears, our worries. They're all different communities of neurons in our brain. And so this principle, we're going to see, mentioned it several times tonight, that neurons that wire together, end up making us who we are and who we become. Has a lot to do with how our neurons get wired together. And there are different times in life where things happen that create these communities. And they have a big influence on our behavior. It's another way to put it. Neuron A repeatedly takes part in firing neuron B, then the synapse from A to B is strengthened. So it's the same kind of thing. These become, from pathways, over time, over repetition, these pathways get stronger and stronger and stronger and become highways to where, if you got wired for barbecue. I love barbecue. I don't know if you guys like barbecue or not. So I've got a real strong pathway for barbecue. If I go buy a barbecue place, I'm like, the car starts, it starts automatically turning towards the place. And what's that place over on the bay, or the sound, or what do you call the place? The Hooks. It's kind of a funny name for a barbecue place. What's it called? Yeah, the armpit. Yeah, the armpit. Armpit. Yeah. Has anybody been there? I was really curious last time I was here. I was like, that sounds like I got to try this place. Is barbecue good there?
It is.
Yeah, it's pretty okay. Well, that might. Yeah, I gotta get there. So anyway. All right. So in these synapses, the main chemicals that come into play are dopamine, serotonin, testosterone, and estrogen or oxytocin. So what that basically means is that your personality type will depend a lot on which one of these is stronger. Every person has different levels of these neurotransmitters, and based on the strength of that neurotransmitter, they found the personality types develop. So dopamine, the pleasure hormone, like you get eating chocolate. Any girls that are like chocolate, okay? You've got a little chocolate community in your brain, okay? Got a little chocolate village right there in your brain. Dopamine would be strong on your part. Norepinephrine has to do with like kind of adrenaline kind of rush, kind of people that really like thrill, or kind of the adrenaline junkies. Norepinephrine is part strong part of their personality. Serotonin has a lot to do with you're anxious or depressed. It's a lot to do with the level of serotonin in your brain. And that's more of the brain can, when you're in love, you may feel like you're going crazy. That's probably because of the serotonin rush. And oxytocin means a lot of present. Oxytocin is a cuddle chemical, the feel-good chemical, bonding chemical, and that's also. And it doesn't matter, male or female, you may fall into a personality type, even if you're male, that's heavy in estrogen. And if you're female, these aren't all based on sexuality, on what your sex is. You could be strong in one of these areas. And so what Dr. Fisher did is she tried to say, well, based on these and these types of personality traits, these levels of neuroconductors, let's do a study and find out how that impacts our attraction. If you're a strong dopamine person, does that mean you're attracted to a certain kind of person? If you're a strong estrogen person or oxytocin person, does that mean you're attracted to somebody else? They tried to break it down. Interesting what they found out. She broke it into 4 categories: explorer, builder, director, negotiator. So we're going to kind of see, maybe we'll do a little test here and see if you know what you are. So explorer, this is the strong dopamine person. Okay, so they are risk-taking, novelty-seeking, curious, creative, spontaneous, optimistic. Does anybody think you're an explorer? They may say, I'm an explorer. Some explorers out there, okay? All right, some explorers, all right. One that came to my mind was, this guy, Mr. Branson, all right, he is a constant explorer. He's always puts in the envelope to go on ballooning trips or flight trip. The guy wants to go into space and building a company to go into space. He would be a modern-day explorer. Then, of course, she went. Never mind. Forget you saw that. The builder. Calm, social, popular, cautious, traditional, religious, expressive of serotonin. Okay. Any builders in here? You're a builder. Okay. The YouTube I watched that suggested some of these. They had Michelle Obama as a builder. I don't know Michelle very well. I thought Oprah would be more a builder than me. If you look at those characteristics, calm, social, and popular. There's no popular Oprah. Cautious, traditional, religious. I kind of thought that might be Oprah, but a builder, strong and serotonin. The director, direct, decisive, tough-minded, competitive, ambitious. I know one person that's a director for sure. One director at every church. Probably more than one. The guy back there in the hat in the back is that's a director. That guy's a director. Ray, do you agree?
Oh, I'm a director.
Yeah, there you go. Other directors back there.
So I actually read the book by Helen Fisher, who I didn't develop these types, and I took the test. And I got high, like almost an equal to director and explorer.
Okay.
So that would be an interesting combination. So basically what happened is I got third place negotiator, almost the same score, like hardly any difference. And then almost 0 builder. But when you describe it like that, I would say that I might be a lot more builder, but maybe that's just because of competing interests. I'm not really sure.
You know, I'm sure that these are not hard and fast categories. I'm sure there's lots of mixing and matching, and maybe depending on what day of the week it is. We have mixtures, but it's interesting. I love to hear it, but I'll mention it in a second. That's pretty cool. So this is an easy call. That's a director. That's no offense to you, Ray, at all. I'm just saying, it's just the way she has. I mean, I don't know. That seems like that fits to be pretty good. And then the last category is heavy in the directors. Obviously, they're strong in testosterone. Okay, again, not all. It doesn't have to be a man or woman trait. Some women are strong in testosterone, and that's just the way it goes. So also then, negotiator, expressive estrogen and oxytocin, big picture, flexible, imaginative, intuitive, compassionate. Any negotiators here? And here I thought, that's why that works. It's kind of why that works. If you were both directors, that could be a problem. That could be a problem. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit. So basically, you guys see these 4 types. Then
they could be, I hate to say it, okay, but they could be in combination. So for Hillary Clinton, I would probably put director builder. For Bill Clinton, I might put explorer negotiator.
you know, I think you're probably right. You're probably right. So here's what they kind of found out who goes together. This is a first date. This study looked at who you're going to choose for your first date. So you're going to have the attraction to your date. Well, explorers, for the most part, are attracted to explorers. They want to find people to do the things they like to do. If they're a hiker or biker, what you like to do. You're going to find someone that. So the idea of off the track isn't always true. Similars attract, and her studies show that similars attract. Builders also tend to like other builders. They have that in common. They definitely like to build things together. Where it was, the exception is with the negotiator director. They tended to go better like in the opposite. Okay? And if you got two directors, that could be like having 2 alpha dogs. That could get ugly, you know. So it's better to have a director and negotiator together. They tend to like each other more, and vice versa. They tend to be a good team together, less conflict, but they still get things done because the director makes sure of that. That's how that goes. They have a relationship like that, you observe. Okay. So opposites do attract, but not in every case, according to the study. This is the book she's talking to. Why can't I her? You can do the test. You go to Hello Quizzy. You can take the test. I don't think it costs anything. You can take the test and find out what you are, and that might help you to know why you're attracted or not attracted to another person. And generally, the study is not doing long term. So we don't really know the long term effects of how these relationships work out. She's talking about initial attraction with the studies about. Well, what other studies do we have out there about attraction? This one we're just going to call Love Stinks. Love Stinks because the study was based on smell. We know in the animal world, animals are attracted to one another based on smell. You've seen the dog in the dog park, how they greet each other. Decide to put that slide up there. I can slide to that. I said, you can let your own imagination do that. Animals go a lot by smell. And it did, well, how about humans? The smell have a play, and there's a huge market out there in the pheromone market. You know, a lot of claims out there that if you buy this spray, you know, it's kind of like buying like Axe deodorant. You know, they sell this stuff, mainly the guys, I think, wanting to attract girls. But was there any truth to that? What do we know? Well, interesting studies. Basically, we all have these called MHCs, major compatibility complex. Everybody's got MHCs, okay? So we all have them. They're trying to figure out, well, is that relevant? Is that any different? So, this Rutgers University study, they had guys wear a t-shirt for multiple days. You had to sleep in this t-shirt, they wear a t-shirt multiple days, put it in the baggie, you got to sign a number, you got to sign a number, your name wasn't on the baggie, it's your number, and then they had a pheromone party where they let the girls smell t-shirts. And say, okay, see if the girls were attracted to one smell over another. And the findings were interesting. Basically, they found out that women were attracted to men that smelled the most different from them. And evolutionary biologists would say, well, that's to diversify the gene pool. It would be good because we wouldn't have inbreeding. Very people that smell different than them, they'll have a mixture of genes. It'll be stretching it a bit, but it's a possible conclusion. So basically, they found out women were attracted to men that smell different than them. When they tried to mess them up a little bit, and I don't know how they did that, but they took some girls and got some of their own smell and put it out amongst these shirts as well. And they were definitely not interested in their own smell. They were turned off by their own smell. They liked those that smelled different from them. So how you apply that in real life, I have no idea. I guess the main thing is just take a shower on a regular basis because you don't want that to be an issue. That's probably the best advice I can give you right there. But yeah, pheromone parties were popular for a while. And also just say, save your money, guys. Don't buy the pheromone. There's really no good evidence. And there's interesting studies out there. They've done crazy studies about whether they found that women are more attracted. They found, I didn't do the study, but when a woman is in her cycle, when she's in her most fertile cycle, fertile part of her cycle, that men are more attractive. So if you're looking at a guy you like a lot and you want to get a good response, I'll figure out the timing there. Just saying. They've got some really bizarre studies. Even one study of strippers, they studied when the strippers got the best tips, and based on their fertility cycle. There's so many ways that study could go wrong. I don't think it's not going to happen. It's out there. Yes.
So are you saying women go into heat?
Well, bottom line, yeah. That's really again, that's kind of a natural principle, and it makes sense biologically. When they're most fertile is when they would be most attractive to the other sex. It seems like that does follow, but again, conclusions are hard to come by there. As I said earlier, don't buy pheromones, take away shots. So, but there's other natural laws of attraction as well to be aware of. There's so many of them out there that opposites really attract. Is that a natural thing? What else do we know about attraction? So, a couple other studies interesting out there. There's a lot of information that says familiarity is a big part of attraction. They have done studies that children are most attracted to people that look like are about the same age of their parents. Let's say when they were born. Let's say your parents were really young, you were born. It's called imaging, imprinting. They call it imprinting. That you're most likely to be attracted to a young person when you're at the age when you're looking for a mate. If your parents were older when you were born, you're most likely maybe more interested in an older person. So it tends to be a little bit older. It's got a range, a range. If your dad had blonde hair and blue eyes, girls, you may be looking for a guy the same way. I know it's kind of an icky thought, but yeah, a lot of people marry their dad and marry their mom. It's kind of because of familiarity of imprinting, and you have a good bonding relationship with your parent, you will be attracted to someone who reminds you of your mom or dad. And unfortunately, though, this isn't always a good thing because this familiarity thing goes in a bad place as well. One of the things they find out is that people say, I'm always attracted to the wrong guy. I'm always attracted to the wrong girl. Why does that happen? Why am I having these attractions? Well, this goes back to the idea of there being two parts of your personality. There's a part that we call our little self, or our wounded self, and that's the ego. Then there's a part called the spiritual self, or the higher self, the soul. And the wounded part feels incomplete. In answer to questions its worth, its value, it doesn't feel whole, it feels flawed in some way. My wounded self is the little me, who wonders if I am truly lovable. Okay? On the other hand, the spiritual self, this is your higher self, your soul. It's a part of you that is connected to love, truth, wisdom, and peace within. Your spiritual self knows without a doubt how lovable and valuable you are. In many ways, it's the opposite of ego. So at any given time, we're operating out of one of those two, our ego, our little self, or our greater self. But what happens is, unfortunately, most operate from the little self, the ego, more than the spiritual self. And so we believe we're insignificant, powerless in some way, and we're trying to make up for something we lack. And so looking for outside validation, looking for completion. And we believe we get more if we got a better job, better partner, better house, that we'd be happy. But none of it works, okay? So we're trying to complete something. And that wounded self will oftentimes go back and try to fix things that went wrong in the past. So here's where the picture comes in. If you were wounded, you were abused in some way or mistreated, that imprints. You form a community. Remember, neurons form communities? That's one of your villages. That's one of your neural communities, is that wound. Okay? So your subconscious is trying to go back and fix that. And so you may go from bad relationship to bad relationship to bad relationship. I've seen this all the time. You're like, why is she always picking these loser guys? You think she'd learn at some point. Well, there goes the law of familiarity. That's what she knows. But also it's that the ego is going back in your subconscious. They speculate the subconscious is trying to get you to grow, to learn, to move on. And so you go repeating the same experience over and over again, hoping you'll learn this time. But obviously it's kind of a sad thing, but you'll see it over and over. People tend to go back and forth. Yes?
So I noticed the guys that talk about loser guys often tend to sort of be rule-following builders. And they're not very nice, and they're really mean, and they get in these really big groups of guys that sort of attack explorer director types. And they don't like to, they do hierarchically organize themselves, but they don't let anyone else know. They often have sort of secrets. So when they talk about loser guys, and they talk about, those guys are often really amazing guys that have been hurt, abused, beaten, raped, etc. by other guys that are trying to be nice guys in big groups of jerks, basically.
Yeah, choice of words on my part. I appreciate what you're saying. Good point. But the point is, there are people that are abusive. That's a better word. It's a loser guy. The people that are abusive of others, I kind of lump in that category. So I'm talking about people that are abusive. They tend to go back over and over to similar guys who will abuse them again and again. That's what would be a better way to say that. But they will choose people that were not good for them, not build them up, not complete them, because they're trying to go be a hero or trying to help another person.
Would a director woman be, perhaps a director explorer woman be fulfilled by a builder man?
Well, you're going to talk to Helen about that one, because
Not really.
yeah. Probably not. Probably not.
Even though they might prefer themselves.
Any level, when you get into that kind of relationship, that is for that kind of motivation, it's probably going to be a problem. It's probably going to be difficult because it's not built on a good foundation. So that's a great question.
Well, if the builders would stop getting in the way of other people exploring and just like enjoy their building to themselves, then the other people would be perfectly fine too.
Okay, I'll skip along. So, danger. Now, the danger zone, danger of knowing that you could be prone. If you've had an abusive past, you could be prone to repeating the past over and over again. That's a danger, so be aware. So, a lot of what you can go back to get from Helen Fisher's stuff is know who you are. Know who you are. And that will protect you from potential traps. Know your tendencies. Know your background. Know your vulnerabilities. If you're going to have a successful relationship and be able to, be successful in this attraction game, a big point is have a good self-assessment. Know what your strengths, know where your vulnerabilities are going into relationships. Don't go in just controlled by the whims of chemistry. Take it higher than that. If you're just counting on your chemistry, you're going to get in trouble. Chemistry by itself, wiring by itself, without knowledge to back it up, is a dangerous thing. Okay, so that's one of the factors.
In the population, I think there are 15% directors, 15% explorers or so, and then I think it's something like 60% builders.
A lot more negotiators, not more negotiators, yeah.
Or is it 40-60?
That was the highest percentage, was the negotiators, so.
So basically, there's a lot of builders for a reason in society, right? They keep society stable. But there's no reason for them to necessarily go out and attack all the explorers and make it so
No,
that they have to stop
yeah.
exploring.
That's a different topic, yeah, that's a different topic, that's true, that is true. Let's talk about another issue, the brain wiring, it's pretty relevant right now in our time. Something that Darwin couldn't have seen coming necessarily. And that is that, you're finding a lot more now with the brain scans and MRIs, we're learning so much more about the impact of pornography on the brain. And so, you can't read the fine print. I can really read it myself here. Okay, what was it? So the doctor looks at a person with an addict brain scan. Research shows basically that your appetites, your interests, things you like will be impacted by what you looked at with pornography. We're going to kind of go back to Hebb's law a little bit on this. Neurons that fire together, what happens then? Wire together. So basically, as we're going to get a little deeper in this in a moment, we talk about different hormones, but as a person looks at pornography and look at various types of pornography, look at it over and over again, certain actions, certain attitudes, certain values, and that forms a lot of brain activity, a lot of firing going on there. Over time, it also impacts the wiring. Also, it impacts things like brain size. It actually chemically impacts the brain. It actually changes the wiring of the brain in men and in women. That's one of the scary things about the pornography is a woman who watches enough pornography, her brain will chemically evolve to be more like the brain of a man. And so that's just a scary thought there altogether. But it is, this is what we're learning. It's much more MRIs now, even like, magazines and things like GQ, which would be very liberal and, pro all kinds of sex, are saying, hey, watch out for pornography. It has very negative effects on the brain. Again, firing together, sometimes for hours straight, clicking, forms patterns, forms communities in the brain of appetite, desire, which may not be good things. Someone views pornography, they end up creating an chemical bond with an artificial fake world that can actually lose the ability to bond with real people. And I've seen this in our counseling and our talks around the world. People come and they, in the pornography world, you get to choose whatever you want. Your result is always predictable. You get what you want every time. They get into a real world situation, in a real marriage, they find out they didn't necessarily like that. And rather than staying in bed with their mate, they'll leave and go sit in front of the computer because that's reliable, that's predictable. I get what I want every time there. With my mate, not so much. The question?
Have you read about any research that could correlate this to people playing video games and children with computer games and stuff like that?
There's very much a lot of research coming out right now. I'm not going to get to this lesson, but yes. Basically, the fact that people don't play, especially young men, used to go out and play baseball and have conversations and actually talk to one another. They don't have any of the eye contact, don't have any of that relational interplay that goes on and learning how people actually respond. That's how we learn how to treat people nice, how to treat people bad. There's a great little chance that Lawrence C.K.'s comedian, he has an interview on Jimmy Fallon that's very, very insightful about why he doesn't let his kids have cell phones. It's really hilarious. But basically, he talks about how that's how you learn how to behave right, is because you do something bad, you see somebody has a response, you're like, oh, I really hurt them. I probably shouldn't say those kind of things. If you never talk to a real person, it's why texting is really a poor form of communication, because you can't see the person's face or emotions. And you'll say things on a text you wouldn't say in real life, because it's just a screen, it's not a real person. And you don't see the response, you think, oh, I'm communicating very well. Probably not, because they don't see they can't hear your inflection, they can't see your eyes, they can't see your body language, and so what you're saying can be coming across all wrong, and you have no idea. same idea with video games. You don't have your personal reactions, and so therefore you don't learn what appropriate conversation is or is not, and you don't live in the real world. So yes, I think when you take people that watch hours and hours of pornography and you play hours and hours of video games and watch TV hours and hours, you put them in a relationship, there's no training, there's no ability to relate to real people, and that's causing huge, huge marital difficulties because we need that interaction. Great point. So, let's talk about successful brainwire. So when I say successful, I'm assuming that you want to be in a relationship that's solid, fulfilling, intimate, close, bonded. You want to have a great friend and partner to live with the rest of your life. That's kind of thing that would be, a pretty safe assumption. Most people have that. So the brain is actually wired for that. And the chemicals in the brain that make that happen are two of them mainly. With the guys, one is vasopressin, and with the girls is oxytocin. The vasopressin is an interesting hormone because it's the hormone, I like the word vasopressin. So I've used this illustration, it's like a wax seal. That when a guy has sexual response, gets sexually excited while doing an activity, it presses into his neurons, okay? He gets an image pressed in his brain. And obviously the most release of vasopressin is at ejaculation, orgasm. So what a guy is looking at, time of orgasm ejaculation, is hardwired into his brain in a very major way. That's why pornography is a negative impact, because they get hardwired in their head what their expectations are of sex, which the pornography world is nothing intimate about it. It's very much abusive, it's very much selfish using of other people. But it gets where it's wired, I think, by your creator, to be this great ability to bond with someone. When it's not used correctly, it forms attractions that are unhealthy. Even that's where fetishes come from. People watch a certain kind of sexuality, whatever, over and over again. Their Hep's law wires together. That becomes their appetite, becomes what they want. Where it could be a great tool to bond somebody to another. Let's just say a person saves their hormone for one person, okay? And so they get, we'll just use this piece of, this is Gorilla Tape. It's perfect for traveling, camping, boating, sport, and more. River surface is incredibly strong, okay? So this is Gorilla Tape here. And so this is, I just unrolled it, it's brand new tape, and I put it together here, and now I'm going to try to pull it apart. And I did it, okay? I did it, okay? But now I'll put it back together again. That was much easier, okay? Second time. And if you get a little bit wetness on there, a little in there with it now, it basically loses its stickiness altogether. Unfortunately, the downside of vasopressin, if used correctly, if you bond with one person and you are sexually connected to that one person, incredible bond forms, incredible oneness forms that just glues. It's like sex glue. It's like sex glue that they are bonded together. And it's really cool because that's your person, your brain, your community forms, and that's the person you want. So you want, that's what you think of. Nothing else makes sense to your brain. It's like, I don't want to have sex with them because I'm glued to what I love. And we're bonded alike. We're together. So there's no problem here then. If you're constantly connecting with multiple people, your hormones are being used up, you lose your ability to connect with anybody. You lose your ability to bond. I don't know any guy or girl that wants to be with somebody and always wondering, who are they thinking about now? Who are they really connecting to? What are they remembering right now? Where is their mind at now? The thought of being with one person that's just yours and yours alone, I think it's a powerful thought. the thought of sharing your person with every other memory you've ever had, it's kind of a rugged thought, isn't it? Kind of a pleasant thought. Same thing with oxytocin with the girls. Oxytocin, while not as closely related to orgasm as vasopressin is, oxytocin can be released after a 20-second hug. The girl can release oxytocin, so it's more associated with the women and with the men, but both have both present. Again, oxytocin is meant for is what releases the milk. First time mother nurses is a huge, first time mother nurses is a huge release of oxytocin. It's incredible bonding. But again, the bonding happens when those hormones are used on multiple relationships. The ability to bond becomes less. And it gets into other things that are really a lot more. I mean, I counseled people before that guys that married, their experiences sexually were with somebody that had a certain body type, okay? But then they married somebody with a different body type. The vasopressin had pressed into their brain that their appetite would be for a certain kind of woman. Then they married somebody else, and they're coming from counseling and saying, I'm not attracted to my wife. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. I have no attraction for her. Because my vasopressin got invested somewhere else. So now my brain is wired to that person. I've had women come and say, you know, I was involved with other men in a rock and roll, rough sex, okay? And now I'm married to a gentle man that I love dearly. I can't get aroused with him because my brain was wired for rough rock and roll sex, and that's very frustrating. And I aroused by my husband. All these situations come about, they're very real world. It happens because our vasopressin is not invested, or oxytocin is not invested correctly. We need to be careful when wiring where we invest. Here's something here. If you wear a condom, not only protect you from sexually transmitted diseases, unfortunately it doesn't protect you for what happens to your brain. Okay? It doesn't affect you from your vasopressin and oxytocin release. It's going to form a connection to your brain. It's going to change your appetites. It's going to impact your satisfaction level of your relationships. So that's sad, but it's really the truth. You need to protect your brain, and that can't be done with any kind of device.
And give it oxygen.
So, choices. This is where it gets real here. Good choices are bad. It's not talking about morality. We're just talking about your brain science. Okay. What do you want? Do you want a connected oneness? Do you want to be with somebody that is like yours and yours alone, and you're theirs and theirs alone? And you want that kind of satisfaction of being totally one with somebody else? I mean, if you want that, you need to know before you get married where their brain's been, where their brain is at, what their experience has been, whether they're capable of bonding, whether they're still using pornography, whether they're living a life of spreading their hormones wherever, okay? Or if they're investing them in you and you alone. This is going to be a little rough here, guys, but this is, I think you guys can handle this. Next slide. So the option, and I'm a minister, so I really believe that there's a possibility that we're wired for intimacy. We can have incredible unity physically, emotionally, spiritually. I'm living that life, and not because I deserve it. I made a ton of huge mistakes. One thing that wasn't in my resume, I was a sexual addict for 30 years, okay, so enslaved pornography for 30 years. And so to the point where I was kicked out of my house, threatened with divorce, you know, it was all going down bad. It was really bad. It was like out of my addiction. I know now that this is possible. That living a life totally devoted to my spouse, we have this harmonious relationship. So you got a choice. What do you want? Do you want total harmony, total attraction, long term, or you want to just live by your biology and just let your pheromones and your oxytocin and your vasopressin run wild? It's kind of a choice. You can have this animal instinct, little boots for the moose population of Alaska here. And some people just live like animals. And Trace Dominguez on the Discovery News says, hey, we're all just big animals. We're slaves to our hormones. Some people think that's a choice. Or you choose to have a life where the two become one. And you really strive for spiritual, emotional, and physical unity. That's available. Wiring is important. Wiring is dangerous. And I just wired my wife's writer's cottage And I found out, there's things you need to know before you start wiring. I found out that the neutral wire, the white wire, is not supposed to be hot. Sometimes neutral wires are dangerous. I got a really good shock with neutral wire. And my point is now, you can't stay neutral in this topic. You've got to decide what you want. You've got to decide who you are. You've got to decide what your standards are going to be, what you want in your brain, in your potential mate's brain, what's going to set you up for long-term satisfaction. You can't just lay back and let nature take its course. That's not going to go well. I know this because it's possible because 35 years, and we are one, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Even after, and the good news is if you've made mistakes up to this point, if you've wasted your hormones, if you've made bad decisions, there's a whole thing called neuroplasticity that allows the brain to be reprogrammed, which is very hopeful, but it's very difficult. I've been through 12 years of recovery to rewire my brain. And I can say now that I've been clean and sober for 12 years, after 30 years of addiction, but that is a tough process. Much better for you to do it right the first time. Much better for you to make good decisions about where you're going to invest your hormones and how you're going to be bonded, what you're going to be connected to, not connected to. Make those decisions now, and trust me, whatever it takes, it's worth it, because I wouldn't have it either way. This is an incredible relationship. So, I ran along, got time for a couple questions, but what do you think? What do you think? Does this make any sense at all?
Yes.
Got a little preachy at the end there, I'm sorry, but I'm kind of passionate about this. Because I deal with the tough cases. I deal with divorcing people, I deal with fallout from adultery, fallout from pornography addiction. I get calls every week dealing with people who are addicted, who've had issues because of the misuse of these hormones. And so I get to see the real world fallout. I've seen it here, I've seen it in Jamaica, I've seen it in Kenya, I've seen it all over the world. And so I get kind of fired up when I have a group of young people who've got a chance to not make the mistakes I made.